And I'm like, goodness, over there so we can see that green. Oh yeah, you sit over there so you can see that way. I can see that one in the back. And anyway, it didn't take her long to. She says, he says he's not going to be our friend. He's our teacher. I said, well, I didn't see that one. I said, I'm sure he's somewhat of a friend.
She's the first.
Oh yeah, her eyes were wide open. She was like, wow, that's intense. I said, well, it's probably more like being in college.
No money is funded.
Yeah, I said, it's more like a college. Yeah. Each other, and that's a good thing. Well, yeah, I mean, she wants to be a scientist. I don't know if he knows that or not, but she had middle school was not like she didn't get good grades in science like she should have. Wasn't something there. She didn't connect with the teachers, and I think she wrote about it in Mr. Troutman, but this time it's different. Inspired. He knows what he's doing.
He's out of town to try to
I'm glad she was. I'm like trying to back on you, but I was just it's how healthy is good to you. Yeah, that's I'm cold. Hi. Yeah, you're going to turn your chair around. Talking to my sister about she said she she's a great one more small
That's supposed to see reactions. You can see the reaction. Yeah. Matters now. Thanks, dude. Great. So, well, we're going over the canal. Oh, okay, cool. We bought it. Show me. You're not watching. I'm not going to watch it for a while.
It's not like a sign.
I need chairs. I mean, I'm going to remind Roger.
Big nose. She came to the meeting and she was wearing them.
Patty Anderson.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I just wanted to, we don't have a hard and strict agenda that we're going to follow this evening, but I did want to kind of just set some guidelines about what we're here and what we're hoping to get out of the outcome of this. So Dave will give us a presentation of our cruise ship association liaison here in Towns, and he works very closely with the cruise line industry. Angela is here recording for a newscast, so just know that she is recording for that. It's not being broadcast live. And Debbie is also recording so that she has history for the Borough of comments that are made tonight. We have some other ways that if you would like to put in your comments in writing. I have some sheets of paper up here. There is for pros and suggestions, or cons and concerns. That is how it's split up, but you're welcome to flip it over and free write if you would like. We also have a sign-up list. If there is ever to be a task force, say, that is set to kind of talk about what the future of this discussion may look like, and you're interested in being on that committee, please sign up and we'll contact you if that ever does get started. So we have those things. We have lots of pens. And just know that we're not hoping to leave this discussion with any answers necessarily. We're not going to take a vote tonight and say this or not this. We wanted it to be a forum where people could put their concerns or their suggestions or their ideas or their likes and dislikes just kind of out into the community. The Borough can be available, the Chamber of Commerce can be available, and our cruise ship representatives can be available as well. So we're hoping to come away with lots of good suggestions, and there will be people that are able to answer questions. If you have some burning questions that haven't been able to be answered, we will try to answer those as well. So we have Liz with the Economic Development is here. We have a few Assembly members here in the audience. And then the Berg's here, of course, from Association. So we're going to start off with Dave, and then we'll kind of open it up. If we get too many, like going down little rabbit holes, I'll probably start a sign up for people to be able to speak. But I don't want it to be that strict, but I also don't want to be here all evening. So we'll begin with it.
Well, thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Berg. My wife and I own Viking Travel, and we've been involved in the cruise ship industry for many years, since we came into Petersburg and the ship started coming in the early 1980s. So thanks for coming. We do want to hear your opinions. We want them to be shared. We think they do count. We want to hear from everyone and all sides of this important issue. From a historical perspective, Petersburg has long been an inviting place for visitors. And the community realized years ago that welcoming independent visitors was important part of the local economy. Obviously, the numbers change depending upon a number of things, the economy, and how the ferry schedule operates, the cost of travel. The Borough and the Chamber have been good about reaching out to visitors with memberships in various important visitor organizations to help stimulate visitor interest for years. Small ships have been interested in us for a long time. Lindblad and National Geographic have been coming since the early 1980s, and the interest continues to build. Our location is self-limiting, so I don't think we'll see any in the visitor industry see medium or large ships, at least in cruise line context, coming to Petersburg, nor do I see any talk of a deep water port. That's just not who we are. Cruise lines don't like to backtrack, and as they would have to come into Frederick Sound, and the current in Wrangell Narrows is difficult for small tenders, these boats that the ships use to get people ashore. The lighter boats, the current is a very, very limiting factor of that. Agents like myself represent cruise line agencies of Alaska and Southeast Stevedoring, and our schedule in Ketchikan direct traffic for ships, and these ships that are coming to Alaska. And we've always passed along that Petersburg is not interested in the large ships like Juneau and Ketchikan has. Excuse me for a moment. What happened here, but try to get back on track. So we do have the ability to control where the ship traffic is, and certainly we don't want to see a large number of large ships like happen in Juneau and Ketchikan. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen here. I don't think it's feasible to even think that it will. But We fit in, we handle shopping for the ship. We do a lot of handling local tours and stuff. We make arrangements for people to come to the dentist and doctor, and make reservations in local hotels, employ guides, people that service the cruise ship industry, and we answer to local authorities when there happens to be a problem on the dock or with the ship, somebody has concerns about it. So that's how agents fit in. As an income source in Petersburg, we shouldn't expect the visitor, the independent visitor industry to bring much more than they're already bringing. We certainly try to encourage these folks to visit, but we're constrained by our location. People can't, fly in here unless they buy a, fairly expensive airline ticket. Using the ferry can be difficult. Sometimes they have to stay here many days. It's an uncertain type thing for the ferry, for visitors to be able to use the ferry. And just a second here. Trying to get to my notes, and they're not coming right up. Anyway, there's difficulties in getting people to getting visitors to Petersburg. We have found, though, that about 40% of all visitors that come to Alaska plan to return here in another 5 years, or within 5 years. So there's a lot of return business that's available to us out there by ships that are not coming to Petersburg, for instance, right now. And the ones that do, the people that stay here for 6 or 8 hours, or arrive here one day and leave the next on a cruise ship, the chance of them coming back and seeing, wanting to spend time in a little town like ours is probably pretty good. A lot of these people they're retired, or some are retired, and they have lots of income to be able to spend. And these visitors obviously diversify our local economy to a great extent, because they're spending room tax and bed tax money here as they come into town. So how do we make that diversification happen? Well, by increasing sales tax revenues that the visitors pay when they come here is one way. Another is collecting the new local marine passenger fee for visiting ships. And a third way is to position ourselves by accepting a little larger ship that comes into town that's available and has with it some of the Alaska cruise ship passenger fee that's collected when a ship will come into Alaska. Those funds are split amongst communities that these ships call in, and so those funds can increase quite dramatically as even a small ship carrying 600 to 900 passengers would come in. And as far as our local economy, obviously, sales tax revenues in the borough could decrease as the populace gets older and less seniors are paying sales tax. And also, citizens like the services the way they are. We like it here in Petersburg. We like to be able to go to the gym or have good schools, and we like living here the way we do. But what happens if the Coast Guard changes? There's talk about that. If the Forest Service, decides to close one of their bases, what happens? If things change, we need to be prepared, for changes like that in our economy. That's why we're talking about it. It's apparent that we need to address what the community wants to happen with the visitor industry. If we view visitors as a way to raise revenues in the community, we have them in the summertime, but we can enjoy those benefits and those revenues year-round. And so it can be a win-win situation for all of us. I just don't understand why we're having trouble with this, but I'm gonna. So if we think about this as a win-win situation, some of these ships, they provide a visitor base not only in Petersburg for visitors to come and see, but they support the local economy by the purchases that they make in Petersburg. And we've got a little bit of some examples of just what the companies spend here, but even on cruise this year with their little ship that they were bringing in, had well over $500,000 that they spent here in local purchases, renting hotel rooms, employing dock walks and guides, tours on buses, flight seeing trips, fishing, even the museum benefits because of local admissions that are included with a dock walk fee or a fee that we would charge the ships for bringing people on a historical walk around town, for instance. So what are we looking at? As more ships enter the Alaska market, smaller ships up to, say, 900 passengers in size are seeking places to call. We've already seen this earlier this year with uncruise turning here in Petersburg. And the benefit of those visitors, if we welcome them, not only coming back but spending money while they're here on sales tax and the new passenger fee coming into next year. We've been contacted by Hurtigruten, for instance, the ship on the upper part of this slide. Hurtigruten's obviously based for those of you who don't know, they're based in Norway, but they do have some ocean-going vessels, and this particular ship is about the size of the motor vessel Columbia, the Alaska ferry that comes in. The Viking Cruise Lines has contacted. This is actually a small ship, and in cruise ship jargon, carrying less than 1,000 passengers. And they propose to anchor out at Frederick Sound and bring people in lettering boats. We don't know if they're even planning on coming here yet, but it's a possibility, and that's why we're talking about this. If we look at ships, they come in all sizes, and certainly Petersburg is not the place for most of these shown here. Like I said, the Columbia doesn't even appear on this chart. It's smaller than the smallest vessel on this chart. And in the future, I see, perhaps something of the size of the lower two being interested in coming to Petersburg. But even the lower two can't navigate Wrangell Narrows. And one of the things that's fortunate about our location is that if a ship can't navigate the Wrangell Narrows, they have to come down Frederick Sound, they anchor up, and they go back. And that's backtracking, and the ships don't like to do that. It's a waste of time for them. And so, our community is self-limiting. But let's let others contribute to our economy. The visitor industry has long contributed to the economy in Petersburg. We've had the bed tax that started in the mid-1990s, I think, sought us to make some great improvements over the years. Alaska cruise ship taxes have provided the first $3 million of popular drive-down float in the harbor. Was great for seed money on that. A ship like Viking Orion would likely contribute $36,000 in local passenger fees and a similar amount from the state commercial passenger vessel excise tax if they decide to come to Petersburg. So that's another $70,000 in a year into our local economy, let alone the sales tax that is charged to visitors as they walk around town and buy purchases and have shore excursions and that sort of thing. So ships need services, whether it's welders for repairs or groceries or cold storage or sport fishing guides, walking tours, or flight seeing. There's lots of opportunities for residents to supply these services. And these expand the portions of our economy that benefit us year-round. People have money to spend, they stay here all year, and they enjoy working in Petersburg. There's all kinds of benefits into these, and these passengers are generally only here 6 to 8 hours a day. The Orion might be here 8 times during the summer with their passengers, and then they're gone for the rest of the year. So we have Petersburg to enjoy, and at the expense, if you will, of others contributing to our local economy. We do have some challenges to consider. Accepting more visitors, there's no doubt about it. Even the addition of providing visitors with a simple map that identifies where public restrooms are located can be helpful. And should the need arise, the community can look at, additional requirements that we may need or desire for a cruise ship to come here, and we'll tell them that. As an agency that deals with the ships, if there are certain requirements that are a positive portion of the city, or that are required by the city or borough, then we pass those along, and the cruise ships, if they want to come here, they pay these extra fees if necessary. But typically, only about 2/3 of the passengers that are on a vessel will get off if the vessel is at anchor and lighter into shore. With our location, the only lighter vessels on these ships only carry about 80 passengers at once, and so those passengers, that passenger traffic arriving into town is actually self-limiting, and we can be accommodating by providing places for them to go, like the Sons of Norway on arrival, where they would have a chance to go by there, throughout the day, or providing bus tours that would take people out to remote locations on the island that they're interested in, going to see the fish hatchery or walking the trails at Blind River Rapids, doing other visitor things. And we have the ability of providing over 150 seats on the glacier, to the glacier, both in morning and afternoon departures for people that could go directly off the ship and maybe not even come into Petersburg. So those are types of things that we're looking at for a larger ship that would decrease the impact of visitors on Main Street at any one time during a port call. Lots of opportunities to control or limit the number of visitors as we welcome into the community. So if we're open to discussion as to what works and what doesn't and how to solve potential problems, that's what we're for here tonight. Obviously, visitors stimulate people have jobs and business opportunities. I see people in the audience here and have talked to others that are interested in developing tourism-type businesses that helps diversify our economy. And there's actually little investment that the community needs to make sure that people have a good time in Petersburg while they're coming and may return for a longer experience and spend more time here. Thanks for listening. We'll turn up the lights and talk about it.
I have one question. The boat that came this year that you were referring to, how many people were on that one?
Boats that came this year had a maximum of about 200 passengers. It was on the American Constellation, operated by American Cruise Lines. Others that we typically see around here, with Lindblad, for instance, they brought a vessel this last year, the National Geographic Quest, that had 100 passengers. And next year we'll see the National Geographic Venture in addition to the Quest, a sister ship that's just being launched here this month. And that has 100 passengers also on it. So that's the increase that we'll see next year. Well, the question is, when would Viking likely make a decision? And they are already selling cruises in Alaska in 2020. They haven't announced a final itinerary, so I think it should be coming pretty quick that we would know what their plans are. The Viking, for those of you that don't know, operates a ship. When they bring the Viking Orion to Alaska, and they are operating the Orion, it's a new ship, here in 2019, although it will not be coming to Petersburg. There are foreign vessels, so they have to go foreign, so they'll start in Vancouver and go up to Seward on an 11-day voyage, stopping probably 4 or 5 places, or maybe more than that, 6 places along the way, including places like Valdez and Hubbard Glacier. If they came to Petersburg, they'll have to make room in that schedule for Petersburg, and so they'll have to drop something. Who knows what they'll drop and what they're looking at. But that's the, the kind of the challenge that they have in doing a cruise for somebody that doesn't cost so much or doesn't take too much time out of their lives for someone to come and see Alaska on vacation. And so, they're weighing the benefits and drawbacks of having to anchor out and coming one way into Frederick Sound. They've been to some small places in Europe and other places with large ships. People have been accommodating to them, and they're willing to work with places. They're not the type of line that operates stores in the town. We see that when you go to Juneau and Ketchikan. There are shops that are closed for the majority of the year, and that they only serve cruise ship passengers. And I don't see anyone that's interested in doing that here.
I did specifically ask that at the meeting that we had with Beata from Viking Cruises. I specifically asked how many stores do they own in other communities, and she said none. And she also reiterated that they want to use local people to do their excursions. They don't want to hire someone from their boat that just hops off the boat and then does an excursion out to the glacier or on a walk or whatnot. They want to utilize the local people. Just so you know, those two things were asked at that meeting, and that is what they said. So,
Dave, how many people did we have as a tour coming on cruise ships this year? How does that compare with, like historical averages?
The question is, how do the numbers compare over the past years of cruise ship passengers here? We, in the early 2000s, we peaked at about 18,000 visitors a year here. In 2006, I believe it was. Last year we had about half of that. Next year we'll probably see about 9,000. So we're well under what the community has experienced in the past.
Is that cruise ship passengers or just?
That's the number of cruise ship berths available. I can't say that all of the ships were full, but that's the number of berths that we go with, and that's the numbers that are available to us.
Is there any, we're talking numbers back in the early 2000s, 20,000 passengers came in that given year, for instance. How many come at one time? I mean, this is, in my opinion, probably something larger than Petersburg has ever experienced in one day. And I've got some concerns about it, the infrastructure, and just seeing how tourism has started in other communities at a small level and expanded. And Juneau was mentioned earlier in Ketchikan, and I personally don't want downtown Petersburg to be like Juneau or Ketchikan in the summertime. I don't know, it's just, and then Viking Cruises is selling trip, you say already, to do tours in Alaska. What if a town like Petersburg isn't ready for it, infrastructure-wise? How do we accommodate the people? I think there's a lot of forethought that needs to go into this before they just start coming into town.
Well, that's exactly why we're having a meeting like this, now, and getting these concerns out and trying to address them as to what this might look like. And as you mentioned, in the early 2000s, probably the answer to that question is how many passengers were here in a day. Probably close to 400. Between a couple of the largest ships, perhaps arriving in Petersburg and being here on the same day. It's kind of hard to quantify unless we kind of take a look back at the numbers on that day. But if you think about the ships that were coming in, the Empress of the North had, 260 people, I think it was, and then other ships that were of, not that big, but other ships of 60 or 100 people that were coming in at the same time. That's where I came up with that estimate of about 400.
Thanks.
And then, and also to, let's go back to Dr. Jensen's question, is you're saying about 400 a day. About how many times during that were they in town? A couple times a week we had about 400 passengers, or maybe a little bit more, a couple times a week?
Probably at least once a week. If you think of these ships, they're operating in a 7 or a 10-day voyage. There's going to be days that it's going to be fairly crowded. If you think of an 11-day voyage between Vancouver and Seward, for instance, on the northbound, we're going to be 3 or 4 days into that voyage.
And that's the 2002.
No, I'm talking about if Viking came here, for instance.
Oh, I was referring back to when he was talking about when we had that influx of, and it was how often during a week did we have 400 passengers or more?
Probably once a week.
Probably once a week. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at what a ship like that may do, obviously we've got ships coming from Juneau to Sitka on a 7-day voyage, and they're here on Monday or Tuesday and Thursday, Friday. Every week for 18 voyages for the summer. If Orion comes, they're doing an 11-day voyage from Vancouver to Seward, so they're going to be here on the 2nd or 3rd day of their trip, and then they go to Seward and they're going to be back here on the 8th or 9th day. So there's going to be some days where there are going to be other ships in town. We just can't see it unless they tell us what their schedule is going to be.
Can you tell us how many more cannery workers we had in 2006 than we do now with one less cannery running? Because that's a big difference in influx of people also.
Yeah, the question is how many cannery workers did we have in 2006, and how would that compare to what we had this year?
Probably a lot more because Ocean Beauty was open then.
Yeah, Ocean Beauty was open then, and it's difficult to say. I don't have those figures.
I can tell you.
But Liz,
I feel like that's a lot. Well, I don't have for 2006, but just in the last 4 years, the number is 51% less between 2013 and 2017.
So that's a huge difference.
51% down. So it's probably bigger than that if you go all the way back to 2006.
So Dave, so beginning of May, all the way through August, let's say Viking tours do come here, how many days would that be out of all those days, May through the end of
probably
that?
about 11 days.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Until they publish their schedule, we don't know. But,
Okay.
but they indicated that they would, oh, excuse me, it's not 11, it's an 11-day voyage with eight port calls, 8 days.
8 times in the
8
summer.
times between
All those people up.
between the 1st of June, say, and the end of August. Our cruise ship schedule is moving out. It's moving. There's on cruise especially is calling it the Alaska Awakening, and there's a big article about on cruise in the Alaska Magazine this month, and Beyond Alaska Airlines Magazine, and they're talking about expanding the schedule, and so we're looking at ships coming even before the 1st of May and through the 20th of September now.
But you say eight stops for the whole summer, not 40 stops for the whole
Right,
summer.
8 stops,
8 stops.
8 times.
Yeah.
Just to follow on a little bit with what Mark was talking about, infrastructure.
Yeah, I know, but there's a lot to
Being able
consider.
handle. The ship that came last year, the Borough.
Yeah, right.
Well, they're capable of carrying about 600, I believe, but typically there's only about 200 residents on it at once.
Yeah, so
Two, 300
just a
maybe.
story about what can happen when they come in and we don't have infrastructure. A few days before they arrived, I started getting calls. People wanting to replace your tubers. And so I booked a couple of days for a couple of different groups. And I kept getting more calls and more calls.
We're just good.
Well, the problem was that we didn't have, we weren't ready for that. And I started, and one woman called me back 3 times and started yelling at me because she was mad that her company had booked that trip, the ship to come here. And the town wasn't capable of handling everybody. So you don't want that kind of publicity going around that, So you've got to have the infrastructure, you've got to have the capability to take care of that many people. But yet, if they're only here 1 day a week for 8 times during the summer, what's that capacity? Who pays for that capacity and what happens, How is that taking care of the rest of the time?
Well, Scott, there's ways, I think, to even involve Wrangell
We've had a couple of experiences this last summer where 3 or 4 times their Jet Boat Association came over and brought all 8 of their boats, and we were able to handle, I don't know if it was a Constellation or which boat it was, but to take considerable amount, and I think that would be a good place to, reach out to, because we don't have the capacity.
Well, and that's what's so exciting about thinking about the biking as a growing opportunity, like figuring out how to stretch. If we say we put in a head tax of $10 a person on one of the cruise ships, and then we get tens of thousands of dollars to support local infrastructure like public bathrooms, whether that's maintaining the ones that already exist in a higher quality or installing more, like that just, and then even if a boat like the Viking doesn't come that often, if they just, if it creates a softer cushion for all the rest of the visitor industry, like it's a pretty fun, it's a good thought experiment that's getting us to think about how to grow to that, because that's even just I think, I hear that number, I just think of Mayfest, that people coming in on a boat and not staying in town for the night. So, yeah, like how do we make people comfortable and enjoy town? It's fun to think about.
They must have a wish list, don't they? They just don't show up, say, we want to come to Petersburg. Don't they say, well, we come to Petersburg, but what can you do for us?
One of the things that they've asked for is show excursions for about 300 to 350 people. In other words, something that they can sell to their people on board. They figured themselves only about 2/3 of the people will even get off the ship because it's an anchor. Just because of their traditional operating procedures when people have to come ashore. So they're looking for roughly half of their people to be able to buy something, and that could be a glacier tour, or it could be bus tour out the road. It could be some kind of a historical walking tour to around town, a native carving demonstration of some sort. There's all kinds of opportunities out there.
Like Scott's saying, I'm not sure we have it. All summer we see the dock walks from our local guys. And then I see the Petersburg Creek, I think that's where they go, the 11 boats, they go up the creek. But it's all theirs. It's not no local, so they're going up there. I had one guy come down giving a speech about there's not a lot of wood boats in the harbor anymore because they all sink. It's like, well, I got one that's 81 years old. Another one's 100 here. But, I'm thinking Scott's onto something there too. It's, then what do you do after the first day? They'll be back in 2 weeks. Okay, well, I'll just pack wing. They can't just have a plane off to the side and just use it when they want it. They got to be ready for it. So, I'll just do what I do, but,
I was going to say that's a really good thing about Viking, and there's been a couple other ships like that they're here 2 years ahead of time. They don't want to come and surprise us. Tout Tours was like that too. They were here 2 years ahead of time, setting things up, and they wanted to make sure everything was just right for their customers. And that's the kind of customers that they have on the boat. They don't want to show up here and be, there's nothing to do here. They want a good experience. So I think that's pretty encouraging, because we have had cruise lines that just show up and they don't know much about the community. I'm on board and I hear them saying stuff and I'm like, that's not right. I don't say it out loud, but I pull the people aside and go, and the thing, like you were saying with your boat, that's the kind of things that we want to hear about, because we don't want people going around.
I try to get them to come over and bait gear and do all kinds of stuff. You want something to do, come on over.
It's great that you do, and some ships provide their own naturalists on board. Some want to hire a local guide. That's the nature of what they come. And people like yourself, if you're standing on the dock and you hear something from somebody,
well, I let them know.
You speak up.
They're shocked sometimes. Really?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's reality.
So my thought is, in this economy where so many people are kind of trying to diversify themselves from fishing, don't you think that this is a great opportunity for people to try something new? Take people on hikes, open up a totem carving or a native artifact or something Petersburg related. It gives them a way to make some extra money that maybe otherwise they wouldn't be able to. We've had a struggle with keeping restaurants alive and things like that. Maybe this is the opportunity that we need for some growth besides what's already here and working, you know?
First of all, almost everyone knows me, and I'm so proud to be a Petersburg guy. And Dave has employed me as a vendor, and really, it's been a real kick for me to do this. And at the same time, I have an article here that is a published article, which is very flattering about our community. And Dave, with your permission, I would like to read this. It's about 3 minutes long, and it gives a perspective which is very germane to why we're all here. And so I'll try to speak up loud enough because it would help. It's published quite a while ago, September 1, Sunday issue of the San Francisco Chronicle, entitled "Untouched by Tourism, the Ordinary Can Be Extraordinary." John Flynn writes, "It was a nothing special kind of day in Petersburg, Alaska. The salmon canneries throbbed and hummed. A flyer in the store window advertised an upcoming totem pole raising, and in the Java Who's coffee shop, 2 teenage girls chatted about a wolf they'd seen the day before, right on the edge of town. Out in the harbor, seagulls wheeled and cawed above sailors chugging in with holds full of sockeyes and chinooks. As I strolled through in a misty drizzle down North Nordic Drive at the main street, it all made me think of Werner Heisenberg, the early 20th century quantum physicist. Heisenberg was not, so far as I know, a traveler. But his Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which you probably learned in high school physics class and promptly forgot, is the best description I've ever encountered of the impact mass tourism wreaks on the places we visit. It has popularly come to mean the very act of observing something changes that which you set out to observe. Here along the inside passage of Southeast Alaska, you can neatly divide the towns into 2 categories. Those where the big cruise ships call, and those where they don't. In cruise ports, they've determined, down to the last footstep, just how far passengers are willing to walk from the dock. And we know this is Juneau type of stuff that he's describing. Walk from the dock, and this zone is chock-a-block full with 2 for $10 t-shirt outlets, shops with racks, lined with snow globes and kiosks hawking flight seeing excursions. It takes considerable effort to talk to anyone or see evidence of daily life not directly concerned with the care, feeding, and commercing of cruise ship passengers. Petersburg gets the occasional 70-passenger tour boat, but the big cruise liners don't stop there. It is what I've come to think of as a real place. And to me, it's far more interesting. There are no tourist attractions to speak of, just glimpses of average Alaskans going about your lives. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this. Jan Morris or Pico Iyer would never make this observation, but it reminded me of the old TV show Northern Exposure. Petersburg has the same kind of quirkiness. The town was founded by Norwegian immigrants, and the evidence is everywhere, from the welcoming placards on the stores to the sign next to the speed bump for its temper. Half the town is blonde and blue-eyed, the other half raven-haired and chestnut-skinned, the members of the local Tlingit tribe. Just about everyone has enviable high cheekbones. Outside the Petersburg Fisheries Cannery was a huge sign with the number 11,992,128. A worker, 18-year-old Jason Shushan, was on cigarette break, and I asked him what the number meant. "That's the number of pounds of fish we've canned this year," Shushan said. "We're having kind of a down year. Pink's salmon are only going for 5 cents a pound, and a lot of boats figure it ain't worth the cost of fuel to go out. It's real hard on the town. Some guys may lose their boats. As a glinty-eyed bald eagle watched us from the cannery roof, I asked Shusen what his job was like. I spent 16 to 17 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week, on the wheel of death, he told me. First, the fish go through a machine called a chink that removes the heads, tails, and fins. Yes, at the local museum, it confirms the name apparently common throughout Alaska canneries derives from the fact that Chinese immigrants once performed this task. Next, the fish land on the wheel of death, a large, slow-moving turntable ring along Shusan and other stand. Knives ready to slice anything the machine missed. Oh, I wondered, does he ever get the smell of fish off his clothes? You just can't, he says. At the end of the season, we have a bonfire and burn it all. Down the street, past the Sons of Norway bingo hall, past the sagging old wooden houses with their bright flower boxes, past the memorial to Petersburg fishermen lost at sea, I couldn't help noticing that a father and 2 sons, the Odegaards, perished together in 1999. But past this, a tiny skiff was pulling into Hammer Slough, and it was a man in his 40s, 2 young girls, a tail-wagging black lab named Rosie, and a 10-pound coho salmon. Who caught it? I called out. Jessica Owens, 10, raised her hand proudly. We just had to keep Rosie away from it, because she likes to eat the fish when they're wiggling. All 3 had easy, uncomplicated smiles. Not as if something had just happened to delight them, but as if this was their normal state. I noticed that look all over town. Despite the economic hardships and dangers of the occupations, Petersburg residents seemed content in a way you rarely see in urban areas. It's easy to romanticize these things, potentially on a quick visit. But the one local resident I know, kayaking guide Scott Roberge, confirmed it. This is a pretty happy town. To me, this is a guy who wrote the article, who's traveled all over, so I'm paraphrasing, but at the same, to me, this is the best part of travel. Not photographing and forgetting the sights or visiting attractions contrived for our fleeting amusement, but witnessing how everyday people go about their everyday lives in a quietly remarkable place, especially one that hasn't been Heisenberged. So that's a perspective that I wanted to throw in here too. So thank you, Dave.
Which I, just as I wear many different hats as a harbor master, I'm really about infrastructure issues. As Sons of Norway president, concerned about other things, but also as a resident here, I think that I'm a little bit concerned about a vessel this size just starting that idea of we becoming a Greyhound bus stop. And I don't know that a person, one of 300-400 people, would get that kind of experience here. Right. And so I'm a little concerned. I'm wondering if we could at some point discuss with them, with this particular company, the idea of going a little bit above and beyond maybe on some of the environmental issues. I hear from my fleet constantly, Sumner Straits and out in Chatham Straits as they head into Juneau. Our governor, about 5-6 years ago, allowed something called the mixing zones, school water mixing zones. And so we now have places where there's a lot of smog from engines, and we have they're allowed to dump their gray water, soapy water, all that kind of stuff in these areas, and our fleet is having to fish around this and really noticing some differences. And I am nervous about, I live, overlooking Frederick Sound, about what would that happen even 8 times during our summer months. And so I'm wondering if we could ask them to sign a gentleman's agreement that they would not do those kind of things. I think as a state we need to start talking about saturation points. You look at countries like Norway, they have 3 big major fjords that they now are limiting the amount of tour ships in them because of emissions primarily. And by 2025 have started talking about having all electric cruise ships, not having any emissions at all. And so, you know, I think that's one of the wonderful things about Petersburg is it takes $7,000 or $8,000 to get on. Most of our cruise ships are higher end, so they're more expensive. I asked when I was at that meeting also what the cost of an 11-day cruise was. Dave looked it up, it was $4,300. So now you're talking it's cheaper actually to go on a cruise than to stay home probably, you know, and so I like the idea of it being, you know, Petersburg being harder to get to, more expensive to get to, because I think we get people that shop locally and will buy that Norwegian sweater at Lee's Clothing where you might not get that with, you know, 300 people that are looking for a deal. So anyway, that's my personal hat.
I just wanted to come to that. I personally experienced that when I used to go at Point Baker on a flood tide, a cruise ship coming in, and just as he went past me, he decided to dump his tanks, and my net, and this is a food tradition, my net smelled like an absolute sewer as he went by. And I was really mad about it. I didn't know who to complain to at the time. But, you know, I think there is an environmental issue. When I think of the lodges down the Narrows, the amount of people that come into this town, it's a sight unseen. And yes, we're at big tides, and yes, there's a lot of flushing action, but when you think of the formaldehydes and the chemicals and the oils and everything that's dumped into our pristine waters that we all enjoy and live around every day, I tell you what, I've seen it firsthand, and it was ugly.
Well, and look at Ketchikan. I mean, all summer long, they had fecal matter on the beaches, and that hasn't happened before. So, who's the culprit?
Along with what Bill said, I drove through it this summer. I drove through that stuff for 4 miles, 45 minutes of driving through, looked like alphabet soup almost. It was just disgusting.
But it was legal.
It's legal.
But it's legal.
Oh, yeah.
But it's happening anyway.
I have two things to do. One is that there is a law of diminishing returns in regard to numbers. 900 may technically be a small cruise ship, but relative to what we've seen around town and what's available, you know, the 100 or 200 is a lot different. So you have 2/3 of the people who come to town. You're looking at 500 or 600 people. It's a huge number. And if you have one, then, so they're stopping 8 times in a summer, and then there's the next one, and they stop 8 times, and then you start adding this up. So that's a concern to me. My other one is one that people are talking about the number of people around town. The one that concerns me personally, because I think my quality of life is really important, so I stand up for that, is that when you get these bigger boats, there have been several over the last couple of summers. The one I remember is the Bremen, and they parked down kind of by Sandy Beach area. And all day, the lighter boats were going back and forth and back and forth. It was a constant whine. It's like having a mosquito in your ear that you can't get rid of. And it ruined those days of summer for me. And summer days are too short to ruin. And then at night, they leave their generators on. And if I'm going to go to Seattle, I expect that I might have to use earplugs to sleep at night, but I don't expect that in my own house with those boats. So I am not in favor of these bigger boats sitting out in Frederick Sound, close to ruining my days.
I've seen the sewage out there. I've seen the close to passage in the summertime. It's brown acre. And the small hangs for hours and hours afterwards. It's pretty amazing to see. So, you're saying that this is a clean solution. It's really not. And one thing, I have a concern about the County Bay. I noticed a big increase in the number of people going there this summer. A lot more this summer. And a few years ago, National Marine Fisheries Service came out with some potential rubber seal regulations, and they put them in force in Glacier Bay and Tracy Arm. And they're talking 500 yards away from seals that are, especially when they're pupping. And we managed to convince them that they didn't want to do that in County Bay last time they brought it up because of the numbers. But you start pushing more and more and more people in there, you get all these people coming off, all people in one day coming off of a big ship like that and going in there. NIMS is going to start looking at that. And they're going to, if they shut us down in there, that's 2 months out of the season, puppy time from mid-May through June, where they could potentially shut the place down, because they're talking about it. And if it gets too much more traffic in there, I think we're pretty close to reaching the saturation point over there with what's going on now. I think we'd be maybe doing ourselves a disservice by trying to up that regulation, because they really, there are some people in the juvenile office that have seriously talked about shutting it down. They've got, in Tracy Arm, they've already put in some navigation channels. They say, stay over on this side, go over on this side. But if you're up there in the summertime in the home, you can't do that. Sometimes the bay is absolutely full. You have to go in one place you can. And if they try to put in navigation lanes up there, it just flat out won't work. And they start trying to enforce a 500-yard distance away from seals. It's not going to happen. And another issue with saturation too is I know we've talked about uncrews being such a great thing coming to town, but right now the Forest Service is really pissed at them because they have been going over there, and I've seen it myself. They've affected my business. They are putting huge numbers of people ashore on the beach in the County Bay. It's a wilderness area. The Forest Service has a policy that they're not supposed to put more than 12 at a time inside of each other. I've personally seen them put 4 or 5 people, 4 groups at a time, so you've got 40-some people on a short section of beach. And they're telling the Forest Service that, we can do this because it's not Forest Service land. Technically, they're right. They're below the mean high tide, which is not Forest Service land, that's state land. State doesn't have that same policy yet, but they have a Forest Service permit, and they know they're not supposed to be putting more than 12 people. So they're thumbing their noses at the wilderness regulations. And there have been times when I've had groups over there and I can't go ashore. I have a permit to go ashore over there. They don't have a permit to take people up into that part, but yet they're blocking you from doing it because they're putting so many people on the beach. And they've had discussions back and forth with the Forest Service, and the Forest Service is not very happy. So we really have to be careful about bringing that many more people in here. It sounds good, yeah, and we want to diversify the economy in town, but to do it in large groups like that, I see some real problems. We don't want to hurt ourselves by doing it.
I'm surprised that Uncruise doesn't even, they only have one boat that comes here. I think.
We have a number of boats that come into the area.
Oh, that don't stop here.
They're down here almost every day. They anchor in the Cove and down there.
There are boats that don't stop here.
And they anchor there at the mouth of the bay, and they put a bunch of boats out with 12 people in. And National Geographic boats do the same thing, but they stay on the boat. The uncruised people, they've been putting people ashore, which is just really, like I said, they're thumbing their noses at the wilderness regulations. The Forest Service is not very happy with them.
One thing I did like hearing, because I was again at that meeting, is that the Viking cruises really were looking at using local and not doing it themselves. I know, wearing my Sons of Norway hat, we had more boats come to Petersburg for a number of years. It hasn't been our high point, but we took in at the Sons of Norway this year $5,700 total. A third of that went to the cleaning lady, a third of that went to utilities and insurance. And so the Sons of Norway really, on the 42 stops that came through, they deal with Levy and Heidi because they don't want to deal with the Sons of Norway and our requirements of the $1 million liability policy. And so this industry has really kind of cut this kind of the caretakers of the local shtick out of it, and a lot of them now go directly to Heidi and have the dancers go down to the boat. They go directly to Levy and Heidi and have them bring down cookies rather than coming through and using the Sons of Norway. And so it was nice to hear that from the Viking, that they were looking at more local, because the other ones really don't use a lot of local. I don't know how many of them get off the boat and go to Ron Lesh or to Scott to go out to the glacier. I think a lot of them, it's part of their package. Going up Petersburg Creek, they don't use local, they have all their own boats. And so they've come here and seen what we do and are now doing it themselves and cutting us out. And so, that's part of, that, like as a Sons of Norway, that industry isn't really doing a whole lot for maintaining a lot of the cultural. As I'm a member of the museum, we see some, but we don't see very many. Again, a lot of them have their own people on board that tell about the history of Petersburg, and they don't come to the museum.
Mm-hmm. And that's the concern.
So this Viking cruise was really adamant about using local, so that was a better.
Yeah, because you see that all over, where it starts out as a good thing, and then as time goes on, then they start bringing in their own people and cut out the locals, and then before you know it, you have these international diamond stores moving in. I know you say that's not going to happen here, but we've seen it happen in other places. And in communities smaller than Petersburg, I mean, Skagway, they had a population of 100, and I remember when we did a survey back in 2000, 2003 that went out to the public, there was response from the city of Skagway commending us for not allowing the large ships, with a great big long letter on what they had gone through in the process.
I don't know if we did not allow them, or they just didn't come. I see that
there was a vote, and the community voted against it.
Well, I think we kind of researched that a little bit. That was that McDowell Group report. I don't know if it was a vote.
And there was a 63% of the community was not in favor.
There were several different committees and
survey of some kind.
It was surveys and votes and people.
And I don't know, Liz, did you conduct those, or?
I didn't. It wasn't a vote. It was just
a survey, but the results were.
I left them up there. The result was private.
Well, we did a big survey maybe 15 years ago, and it came out that we wanted to keep it a working town with some of the smaller boats.
Right, yes.
And so to have it be a balance, I think that's what we all came up with, and I think that's what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like, if we can maintain what we have carefully built up, and there's a lot of infrastructure that people, that goes on, that if we can keep the boats that are coming here now happy and not squeeze them out, but maybe get that new dolphin in, is that what we're talking about? So that some of the bigger boat, like the Constellation, can tie up in a different location? Is that what we're...
Yeah, that's the proposal. That's
Petra's made that as part of an offer. Yeah, so right now we're in a negotiation, not quite, but we're talking about getting into negotiation about the harbor trading some property, and in that trade, the difference of price from our property to their property is about $120,000, and Petro has committed that for 3 years if we go ahead and do this, to use their money, their $120,000 that they would get from our payment to them, to go towards a dolphin that would be on the southern end of the port dock, which is right adjacent to the Petro fuel dock. so that we could move some of these ships off where they fuel bigger vessels, the tenders, and some of our bigger fishing boats, and so therefore stay longer rather than taking up the entire face. And so Bob is, has to require them to either leave the dock and come back or actually just be there for a shorter period of time. So these boats could stay a little longer.
But it also frees up the drive-down dock.
Potentially it could, yeah, sure.
Eventually have the drive-down dock.
If we, but it also, could really...
do you have the drive-down dock though with him?
What?
What congestion at the drive-down dock?
That's crazy.
Well, so these
summertime though.
Well, these ships will take up the face of the dock for as long as we allow them to, and so they, they love it. So every single tour ship that we have coming here would prefer to go there versus any other location in the harbor. And
Most
so,
of the boats that I do, though, they're not there all day, though.
No, but they'd like to be.
But that's where you stop that, though. It's nice to go down to the drive-down
Well, that's
dock
what we're
to pick
talking
up the
about.
laundry.
That's what
To
we're
pick up the laundry.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
And at this other place, can you drive down?
Where you'd right to the, you'd be able to go like you do now to the ones that tie up to the face of the fuel dock.
Won't feel that, yeah. Except for it's really hard to get laundry when it's low tide.
Well, you charge more.
Well, I'm not kind of one of those gougers either.
We got to turn into those. We got to turn into those kind of people.
Well,
we got to accommodate a larger vessel.
Yes.
How large vessel can that? So they don't.
You're still limited, 300 feet. Our biggest boat that we ever tied up there would be that paddle wheeler, remember? And it was 280 feet. So, the face of Ocean Beauty is 297 feet. So you're looking at the face of Ocean Beauty is about the biggest boat that we could get in.
So does Petersburg have limits? Are we going to have limits? So Scott can go to Laconia Bay. All I see is they kicked all the fishermen out of Glacier Bay to save it. And then they put in these huge cruise ships puking smoke, and I've seen it. I just saw it last summer twice. Catch can. I got a video on my phone. It shows right up in the morning at 6, having coffee on the deck, looking over at 2 cruise ships tied to the dock catch can. Just this blue haze, solid, laying low, the whole, it was like, and I made some comments. But then again last summer, going up Stevens Pass, early in the morning, about 5 in the morning, here come 2 cruise ships heading to Juneau. In Pipus Bay, I was going, oh my God, those people should get out of there. They're going to be breathing this stuff. And so I think they've limited Glacier Bay fishermen for sure, because we're terrible. But they let in the cruise ships. So is Glacier Bay limited to cruise ships? Is Tracy Arm limited to cruise ships? But Frederick Sound, keep them coming. Keep them coming. When's that going to end? I'm worried not just about Petersburg, but all this out there. I see it. I see it. We all see it. And so are we going to have limits here if we let this in? Let one in? Okay, the Viking. Okay, we can deal with one boat. We'll, but then it countered what I've heard, like in Brenda's store when I was in there. I talk a lot. And I'm talking to tourists. They love it because, geez, it's a working town. There's nothing, it's not a tourist trap. And then what Grant said, that's what that gentleman liked. And when I go on vacation, I see cruise ships, I go the other way. And I was like, oh, I'll go the other way. I'm not going swimming in that water for sure. But anyway, so I'm getting worried about like what Scott's saying. I had no idea that was happening right in our front yard already. It's already starting. Is there an end in sight? Or do we just get this one and another one?
Conversation we have at the state level.
Scary.
I don't think does anybody in this room want a large cruise ship here? I don't think anybody's talking about that, but we have to set up a structure. Right?
Well, it sounds like the little ones are even...
I agree. Does anybody here want a really large cruise ship coming here?
I guess you have to define what a large cruise ship is, because when we're talking that we have, 400 at the most in the past in town at once? Yeah, and then so on this boat, the proposed boat, will carry 900, so potentially we could have 600 people. So that's 200 more than we're already used to dealing with. That's substantial in my mind. I mean, I don't know what it is to other people, but that's a huge increase. And then you have to accommodate them with all the toiletry, paper towels, soaps for the bathrooms, maintaining.
We're talking too about, we're talking about Skagway, where there's 3, very large cruise ships.
Yes.
And I know we all want to protect ourselves.
But they're coming anyway. Like, the ones Scott's talking about aren't the ones that are coming into town, right? They're ones that are going somewhere else, that are stopping here, seeing everything we have, taking up your Wakani Bay time, but not spending $1 in Petersburg. No money is coming into this town from those ships that he's talking about.
The French boat that was out here, that it came through, maybe it come through this summer too. No, the French boat, was it French?
Yeah.
And how many did they carry?
240.
Okay. I don't know that I had experienced this before, but twice with that boat. And maybe there was a language barrier, I don't know, but those passengers would walk in the middle of the street and really not pay attention to what was going on around them, which was shocking, because we are a working town.
Sounds like that happens every other day.
Candy workers, all in the middle. Oh, just down the middle.
Oh, I'm not out at night.
You
don't have to be during the day.
About 4 months a year in Sitka. I spend it through the summer. And I work right downtown Sitka for 4 months. So I see all the people all the time and the amount of traffic that they get. I see what their 4th of July is like. They've moved out of downtown. I hear from a lot of locals, and I work with a lot of people who've lived there their whole lives, generations, and they're like, it's changed. But, they have they have a deep water port, so they can bring in anywhere, I think, 3 to 4 ships a day. And they do this every other day. And then they have ships anchored up, and they have ramps for all the library boats to come in and get dumped off in town. And then there's buses taking them out to the Fortress of the Bears and the Science Center and Totem Park and the brewery and the Raptor Center, and they've got tons of things to do there. But, they can handle that amount of traffic. It's not fun, but they have set it up over the years, slowly and slowly. They have set that place up to where they can accommodate that many boats. What do they have? 12,000?
Much bigger boats.
Much, yes, way bigger vessels than 900 passengers. You're talking, thousands of Yeah, but this is what they wanted. They wanted this, and they get a lot of revenue for it. They are, but, I am for these ships coming in. I do live in Sitka for those 3-4 months out of the year, and I'm right in the middle of it. And it's, it doesn't really bother me that terribly. I know it's not that great. I kind of go about my business. I'm mainly in Borough anyway, so. But, there's a lot of people who make a lot of money off, there's a lot of revenue made from those people coming to town. So, I think that there's some things that we can look at that they've done. We don't have to do, but.
Well, yeah, I'm hearing trends about concerns with logistics of the slightly larger ships that have to anchor out and stuff, and that's something that can be learned from and planned around. And then after the summer, if it doesn't go well with the specific company, we can make it clear that we don't want them back. There is such a thing as take-backs. But then also a concern about, space, like the Nat Geo ships, only the 2 smaller ones on their way south go to Haida Gwaii because they do have a set limit on how many people are allowed to come. So like the larger ships are not allowed to stop there. So we could decide after we try the Viking for a season, realize that that's too much influx, like if we decide to cap, because I was realizing too, our numbers, when we were talking about the number of passengers already coming into town, that's still only including passengers, not crew. For example, the Quest has 100 passengers and 40 crew members, and those are people that come into town to buy socks, deodorant, there's one guy who loves Papa Bear's Pizza. He comes up every year. He's like, I need to go get my Papa Bear's Pizza. He loves it. He's been coming here for 15 years. Like, he loves this place. And so that's a whole other dimension. We're already getting some days 400 people, probably.
Good extra toughs at Lee's Clothing.
Yeah. They know
And
where
the
to
crew
go.
love those girls' extra toughs that you stock, Heidi. They like them.
Yeah, but so just thinking about like these kinds of, like these are all questions that we're asking that have pretty easy answers if we just figure out how to, you know, coordinate with the ships, but where they can anchor up and how to be polite neighbors. And, you know, if we do find that limit, what is that limit? How much do we cooperate with Wrangell? How much further out do we send people on Frederick Sound versus coming into town? Like, this is all. And then something Angela just said, tons of things to do in Sitka struck out to me when I look around and I see how few of my classmates have chosen to come back or how few young people choose to stay here. And you think about the room for growth within these industries, like we need more people with their licenses, more people that can fly planes, more people that can learn more, like younger people to learn about the history of town, to do the walking tours, to drive around town. Like these are all things, like the Norwegian dancers are basically getting trained for this career right now. You come out there, you know how to talk up a visitor, you learn about town, so you aren't wrong when you talk to them. Like we're already forming the baseline of this, you know, community-owned infrastructure that's pretty exciting. So it's kind of also, I hate to say it, but I hear a lot of calls for more regulation of this industry at the state level. And so if we, like if this many people turned up in Juneau during one of these hearings on cruise ship regulations, like that's what I'm hearing when people talk about, you know, water and air quality. Like that's way beyond our control, but this is a pretty powerhouse group of people that are concerned about those things and that do affect their other industries. So
have you met their lobbyists?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is there a limit, we don't know about, on Wrangell's point of view? Like, do they have a limit on their cruise ship capacity that can and or is it let?
I think it's about 2,000 people.
Is there a limit on one ship at a time?
One ship, yeah. I think.
Curious.
Yeah,
Because they don't have
I know from RG today, and they actually surveyed the community by sending a letter to all the households. They had a pretty good response that people were comfortable with
Wrangell likes the better.
getting a ship, 1,500 people on a day. It's not uncommon.
Wrangell's very different.
Yeah.
They like to diversify themselves. They don't have a whole, you can go to Wrangell on any day and you can, there's no cars on Main Street. I mean, they don't have a working town, so that is different.
It's working more now in the last 10 years or so. It's had a lot of facelift and I think regenerating and investing back into their downtown economy from about 10, 12 years ago when I was first going over in practice, and just watching it just get in, you know, kind of maybe they're selling the exclusivity of Van Ann and maybe they're doing more industry stuff. And
they have
They have a travel list.
And they also have an open air market, I think, downtown where people can, a covered area where people can come in community-wise and open up a little nonprofit selling some Kool-Aid for the day or something.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, so Wrangell ships are how big? I've been over there quite a few times.
That was my original.
How big is theirs? That was it Queen
Probably
something?
1,500 people.
Okay, so we're not talking like a third of the size of that, correct?
Yeah.
When I'm over there, I never see any real issues with the people. They're always courteous and actually want to learn what's going on in the community. And me personally, I would rather have people paying coming to our community than the extra cannery workers from Ocean Beauty. I mean, we don't have any issues with the tourists. Our butts off with all these cannery workers. I mean, I understand when the cannery workers BFI's doing a great job with some of theirs, but exactly. And so, I mean, I think it's only talking a third of the people. I mean, I think well, the third of what Wrangell's getting. I mean, I've been over there when they offload, and it doesn't seem all that bad because, like you said, not all of them are coming off, and But I mean, I wouldn't mind giving it a shot on a trial basis. I mean, let's try it the next year or two and see how the community likes it, roll the community, and then we'll move from there.
Mary Jessica?
But Glow gets more back.
The
queen by herself.
I think the community needs to weigh in before we embrace this large of a ship. And like what Mr. Berg was saying earlier, so if 600 come off, if only 2/3, but nice sunny day, you're anchored up 5 minutes away from downtown, maybe it'll be 900. Let's think of the worst case scenario. Another boat comes in, has 250 passengers, so that's 1,100 people you have in town. It's going to tax our infrastructure. I mean, well, the lighted out ship won't be using the sewer, but the people in town will be. And you have to take, that into consideration. One ship came this year and brought influenza to town, and when they were asked to reply, I heard they didn't reply. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not totally up to speed on that. Ketchikan, a much larger scale, so just scale it down to our size population. They have 400 and some medevacs a year. So maybe we only have 50. How many do we have now? The whole infrastructure is going to be taxed. And to have 9 beaches in Ketchikan closed by DEC because of fecal chloroform, assuming it's coming, I shouldn't even say assuming it's coming from ships, potentially coming from ships. I mean, I don't want to expedite Petersburg and think we're going to make a bunch of money off of it and change my lifestyle. Like the article that Grant Trask read. They loved it because of what it is, not because of what it could be. And I think one ship comes, and another small Perdigruten or whoever says, oh, look at this. Viking cruise is up there. Let's go on the other week. Let's go on the off week. So then pretty soon it's every week. And I know we need to diversify our economy, but at what cost? I mean, and what's the net gain?
Well, my issue is how do you propose to stop people from coming here? And is it going to be just cruise ships, or is it going to be other businesses? That's what I don't like. It's like, we do need to have the discussion, but I think we can try to mitigate some of these things and try it instead of getting to the bottom where Wrangell was. That's why I think that's why they embrace it, because they hit bottom. That people were leaving, and I'd rather be a little more proactive and say, well, what can we do to make it work?
Maybe we can figure out a carrying capacity or a saturation rate.
Do we have that authority or that ability to control the people or the size of things?
Not come here, we're just not ready. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be put into place before. I mean, I think everybody agrees that we need tourism. I mean, there needs to be a healthy balance.
Oh, yeah. That's why we're talking about it.
But that,
I've seen the
much of
bigger
the
tourist
jump
industry
is,
actually not care about the environment much when they're
It was, yeah.
doing some of the, and maybe their
work.
discharges stuff
and
within the
there's other
regulations, then
things to
that's bad
consider too,
state.
like when there's sound and
Excuse me, can we hold the conversation to one person speaking at a time so that we all can hear, everyone's concerns? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Did we institute a head tax here? I know it was talked about.
A tax?
Yeah, a charge $5.
There's a $5 marine passenger fee that's coming into effect on January 1st.
And does that include all boats in the borough? I mean, these boats that are not coming to town, are we still able to collect
I'll
from
let
them?
Deputy.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, we're still struggling on how it all works. If you are paying a sales tax coming to Petersburg, the idea is you're paying a fee. But if you're not paying a tax on a cruise coming to Petersburg, then you should be paying a head tax.
That marine
Does it have
passenger.
to come into Petersburg though, or are these ones that go, it can't come into the borough?
It doesn't just cross the road.
Okay, thank you.
You can snag them.
And so that So that fee is coming into effect here this next year for next summer's ships, and it will be
Taxes in it.
No, it's already on the books. So the question is right now as to whether or not those ships are also subject to sales tax, and that's the question that's proposed to come before the assembly now. But this is going to, the marine passenger fee will be $5 on any vessel that can carry over 20 passengers, something like that.
That's the thing that we're struggling with on the assemblies, because it seems very clear when Jody explains it to you individually. When you get it out in the public, what the premises of it is that if you say pay $10,000 for a cruise, and you spend, and that's for a 10-day cruise, and you spend 1 day in Petersburg, well, that means $1,000 then needs to be taxed 6%. So they're going to ask the cruise ship to try to figure out how they're going to divide that, or to figure out what that formula is, and then pay the borough 6% for that particular time they're here. And so we're like all going, is that something that we want to consider?
Seems like.
It just seems really dicey to me when
Well, it is. That's why the marine passenger fee is the alternative to that, and it's very easy to quantify. Because you have a list of passengers, and that's how much you pay.
Right.
And part of this discussion, we have people who are paying sales tax from Sitka coming to Petersburg on a trip. But we have people who are not paying sales tax when they're traveling from Seattle to Ketchikan, and they're coming to Petersburg and they're going through town. Those are the folks that need to pay the $5 marine passenger. It's not a lot of money, but it's going to pay for toilet paper. It's going to pay for...
Really? I know. $5,000 a year is what we go through. Now on TP.
I have a question. What's going on if they charged that $5 head tax and then the cruise ship was suing them back for not using it correctly? Are we going to address that up front so we don't have to deal with it?
We have a list of things.
Okay.
The passenger fee was crafted around that issue.
Okay.
We didn't want to get hung up in the same thing that Juno
litigation, yeah. Okay.
Because Juno was spending that money on stuff that wasn't tourist related.
The whale.
So we can't help
Along the regular arrows. It comes up and so
What's that, Jeff? Well, I think, we do have an amazing opportunity. Thank you, Dave, for leading this, first of all. I think this is a hugely valuable conversation. As, again, caretaker of infrastructure, I'm concerned about that, and if this industry is really an economic driver that we want to pursue, we do have an awesome opportunity. I mean, just let's throw it out there. Ocean Beauty is an ideal location that somehow we get or we inherit or something. I mean, all we're doing is really turning it into a retirement community. From my point of view, and a seasonal. I mean, I look at the new building that's going out in my neighborhood, and other than Scott, most of it's seasonal activity. I had 22 dark homes along Sandy Beach, the water side, as I came in here tonight.
I wasn't up.
So, anyway, that being said, you can go about it like Juno did. They went out to their community, like we're doing now, and said, okay, is there economic opportunity? The community embraced it. They went after a $65 million revenue bond that before Dick Somerville ever drew a line on a piece of paper, they already had contracted with the 5 different cruise industries to have that entire waterfront rebuild done in 5 years. They're paying for it off the backs of the industry. Now, of course, in order to do something on a smaller scale here in Petersburg, say we do Ocean Beauty, probably not going to just stop at one outfit like Viking River. Pretty soon we're going to be talking to the Norwegians, and we're going to be talking to other cruise ship industries that see that this could be an opportunity to go into little places, and pretty soon we do have a really vibrant, like Juno does and Ketchikan does. And that is, but we're not coming up with any other ideas, people. We're turning into this retirement community that really
is, I don't know how we're going to afford the lifestyle that Mark and I grew up with.
And they want a new hospital, and now they want to buy that from
Everybody
Brady. I knew that
doesn't
was
want
coming.
to contribute the way that they did when I was a kid.
Well, if we even get back to where it was at 18,000, I mean, interrupt you, but like, you're making an amazing point about just bringing it back to where it was in 2006. Like doubling what it is right now. Like if we find a way to do that in a more sustainable way, because partly why it crashed was, yeah, the larger economy, but also those few specific companies that were coming to town with Elliott. But right now we're so diversified with our boat economy, like who comes to town, there's so many different companies, that we do have a lot of control and we can pull it all together in a really concrete way.
I own an old wood boat.
And as a harbor master, we are saturated. We're going to have to do something.
I wouldn't
We're going to
own a
have
wooden
boats
cannon
here.
for anything.
No, I say take it down. We're going to build a drive down. We're going to make hundreds of dollars out of this. Because put in a $40 million drive down for these tour ships. I mean, that's an opportunity, though.
I came to this thing because I wanted to see the money. Just show me the money.
Hundreds of dollars.
I run my business one way and everybody does it. The government runs it a total different way. And I just want to see how our government's going to run it. Show me the money.
Well, we're giving
Get these tour ships in here. I want to see how much money it's bringing into this town and how much money this town can spend. Now, I have a problem with this, the tourism money I've heard stays within the tourist industry. Gino tried to build a whale. They got in big time trouble. Well, we might need a new ambulance. Oh, you can't use that. You have to take it out of the harbor fund or the general fund. I'm like, what kind of business is that? I own several different boats. I do other things. It all goes in the same place. And then I buy what I need to keep things running, to keep my town going. All of a sudden, the tourism money stays in here, so we're going to have pretty lights. Maybe a whale, but we'll get in trouble. No whales.
Sales tax, right?
The sales tax, yeah, off of how many people.
I see your point. There's obviously some things we can spend the money.
Yeah, and if you can show me money
that you can.
it's going to bring to this town and do us good, not a few people. I worry about our local peoples. I worry about Scott's business. I want him to do good. I don't mind. I don't worry about John Murgis, what he's doing. He's an entrepreneur. Good for him. I don't have a problem with that. But show me the money. If it works, it works. Pros and cons. This is awesome. I have those all the time when I do things. You go, okay, does it work? No. Throw it away, or yes, and do it. So, show me the money, and then I'm stuck on a travel lift because I have to go to Seattle. I can go to Wrangell in 2 years, maybe I can get one of my boats hauled to do work on it. I can't. And now they're talking $40 million hospitals, all this stuff. I just want a $3 million travel lift so I can do all my work on my boats in this town. Everybody's going to make money. The travel lift probably won't, but everybody around it will. So what's going to make me more money for this town, a travel lift or more cruise ships? And then
Maybe it depends on what business you're in.
you had your hand up?
The cruise ships pay for your travel lift.
Well, there's a bunch of big tenders down there right now. Maybe we have to get hauled.
Let's hear the schedule.
I was just curious, with a lot of this implemented too, is the legal, what you would call it, but, you know, we are, and we did form a borough, and what legal actions we can take. You know, Scott described something, and that's having been, you know, I do a lot of hunting, and I'm up in the Alpine and a lot of stuff, and there's places you walk, and you'll leave some tracks, and you go back next year, and they're there again. So you do have an impact. And having an impact on the beach like that is pretty alarming to me. And, you know, stuff like that gets impacted, doesn't change, then you will have to deal with, you know, you've got endangered species, the sea otter swimming around, and like I was talking about, seal, just different impacts like that. And as a borough, as an entity, what legal things we can do to rein that in. I mean, and the letter is great because it does, that's what people come here for, and that's why we live here. But, you know, things like that, maybe we can look into, and maybe we do or do not have something to say about it. As a commercial fisherman out there in the Sound, even this summer, I see the boats going by all the time. You know, I didn't catch very much, and it was a long place to try, but that's also something to take into account is the impacts on industry. Are they going to be anchored in the way? Are we going to be interacting with their day boats coming back and forth so much? You know, those sorts of things. But the last thing I'd leave you with too is of course this is great, and thank you very much. And I do believe that once we start down this road as a community, it'll probably change the community forever. And it might be hard to step it back. So as a community, it is great to have a community decision too, and I hope that we involve the entire community and not just, the Borough Code is an example where there's a tremendous amount of people that don't know what's going on. There's been tons of meetings, lots of outreach as far as on the radio and different things, but there's still a lot of people that I'm convinced they don't know that their structure's changing, and some of them, their zones are changing, and they don't know that. So they're going to be, they didn't partake or whatever, but you need to have more of it's such a big deal. I think you have to have more of an outreach, maybe even door to door, maybe every post office, box holder, maybe social media, the whole blitz to try and get all the input we can, and then whatever decision we make as a community, we can move forward. And a lot of good points otherwise that come up.
Yeah, this is all meeting was great. Part of the discussion needs to be held with the visitor industry, the cruise ship. And they need to be aware of our concerns and the list of things that folks have problems with. And they should be not here where that people need to work on something again later on in the winter, but they need to know about what our concerns are. If there are concerns about toilets and stuff, then they need to help address those and pay for those things. If there's garbage pickup that needs to happen, they should pay for those things, because those are things that wouldn't normally happen. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to change the dynamics of the town of Petersburg. I mean, everybody says they're all for economic development, but when we get an opportunity for economic development, everybody says, well, no, I don't want that person. Yeah, I want this person here. But I mean, we have to be measured on what we want in the community and the effects it's going to have on the community. We have until 2020 or that winter to kind of sort out what we want. That's just a great opportunity.
Yes, you have.
Oh, I didn't have a question, but just a comment for future discussions, and I know that other towns have had this, to have some focus groups on what kind of things do we want to not keep people away from, but what do we want to keep for ourselves? Like I'm thinking paths or whatever. Do we want to ask our visitors and our guides, don't take people up this one, this is for us, so don't, and I know they do that in Juneau. They try to keep some of their sacred cows. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's something you work with the guides, and we're really fortunate. I mean, I went to Ketchikan and met some of my clients there, and we got on a bus and we went out to George Inlet, and the first thing everybody asked this lady was, how long have you been here? And she said, well, I got here about a month ago, and all of the people we have doing guiding here they live here. And that's really special, that they know what they're talking about. They're not giving people too much wrong information, Some of it might be tall tales, but anyway, I think that's pretty special. And I would want not one have to reach out and get accounts like they do.
How would you control crosswalks with that many people?
But they're here for a limited.
And along the lines of Nancy and Jeff, is a lot of these cruise boats that come through here define themselves as eco-friendly, and that's how they sell their ship. Who's going to hold them responsible for keeping along those lines? We are. So if we could bring them back to the table and show them the way.
So didn't Ketchikan have an agreement with their cruise ships that they wouldn't be doing the stuff that they did all summer long?
I don't know the extent of that agreement. I do know that Nancy was telling me that they were driving down the road on this very same bus, and a bear, was spotted, and the driver couldn't stop her because it was prohibited. So there are regulations that
bears, people that we want to pick up, like, no, sorry, I gotta go. So they have limits as to what their shuttles can do. We don't want you stopping in the middle of the street and, gawking at stuff. So, you can come up with things that are important to your town. We don't want you running your generator all night, or whatever, you know.
Be careful what you ask for.
Can that be
You
a
might-
barber in Durham?
I can't help but feel for her with this cruise ship in my front yard. I would go nuts.
Yeah.
We have a cabin out on Reef Island. We've had it since 1960. It's great. There's no people. I can go out there. I can run around in my underwear if they're even on. Until the lodges showed up. And it started out with just Rocky Point. Everything's fine. I still blame my brother for it. Because he came home bragging one day, and all these guys were on the dock. Gee, where'd you catch all that stuff? Where'd you get this stuff? It's like, oh yeah, I was out here. He's in Gig Harbor. But anyway, since then, there it is, lodge or run boat city. There are runs. I cannot sit on our only cabin on this whole island, looking out, and it's just runs everywhere. I'm not sure why.
Commented on the cruise ships.
They're not on a cruise, but it's just the same thing. You got to be careful about this, because you're going to have them, you're going to let one in and do it. I mean, are we going to have a limit? There's that limit thing again, and that just terrifies me, that's going to happen. It's like, yuck. There's a Melissa Torsen's son was here for Trigby's funeral. He cornered me. So he's a fisherman. He's seriously thinking of moving to Petersburg because he's sick of Sitka and all the BS. He wants to come here and fish. You know, I said, well, it's a great place, man. It's paradise as far as I'm concerned. Well, I hope it stays that way.
Anyone else had a comment?
I just say, we should schedule another one of these maybe next month.
Yeah.
You know, so let everybody go home and let this stew over and do another, try to keep it to an hour and a half like we were promised.
You guys should all leave.
We'll wait over that now. I think we'll be more constructive with our time if we know we only have a certain amount.
Certainly appreciate all of your input and comments, and we'll continue to talk about it.
Thank you. And it's a great note. Please fill these out. If you need more time, I listed all of the ways you can return it to me. Just take a picture with your cell phone. You can snap a picture with your cell phone, email, or send it in. And if you need us to email more copies out, that would be great.
How much? You want to be part of the discussion? We can leave the number down. Thank you all for coming.